Council, is that right? Rather than, you don't want to reconvene a PPP?
God, no. I've done that twice already. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm spent.
They're going to bypass.
Yeah. Oh, look, this is really exciting stuff there, and you'd be welcome to reconvene if you wanted to, and you'll have a great time.
I'm waiting to hear what this new letter sounds like.
Yeah. And look, welcome, Ross. I'm not quite certain whether we quite had our times right for you, but it's great that you're back with us as well, Ross. So I appreciate that. And look, we have a wee bit of work to go through. This is obviously in public, which is fair. It should be for this sort of piece of work. But at the towards the end, when I think we're in the position that we'll want to pass some resolutions, I will ask management to leave the meeting so we have some time as elected members and independents with Derek, our auditor. Actually, is Chris also on the line as well, the auditor of the subsidiaries?
To yourself, Chair. Chris is with Derek at the moment doing the final checks, but I haven't had confirmation he'll be logging on.
Okay, rightio. Chris, sorry, I don't know what Chris's last name is. Sorry, but sorry. Janae, yeah. Chris is the auditor of the subsidiaries, but works closely with Derek over the whole group audit. So whether he's with us or not, in fact, whether Derek's with us, we're still waiting literally on the opinion. But as we wait, just a couple of things passed around are what, Patricia? You need to just give us a rough heads up so that we know what we're looking at.
So in front of you, you'll have what we understand will be the draft audit opinion from Audit New Zealand and the letter of representation which the council needs to provide audit, which provides certain comments about that the processes have been done correctly. It also has lists at the very last page 2 uncorrected misstatements that we've agreed that we won't correct. They are not material. There would have been another one there, however it was material, and that is the reason for the delay this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. So as we, when we formally start the meeting, we go live stream, obviously we're back to where I had to avoid, which was that we move to accept these major late items, which are 3, the annual report itself, the opinion, the draft opinion, or the opinion, because I think it's going to be more than draft, be in the next few moments, and also the letter of rep. We'll hear, Michael, from you, and Patricia, I'll leave it to you guys as to whether you tag team or not. I'll invite Derek to make comments in public, open discussion for council, and then I will ask Derek to speak directly to the elected members, that all being the case. It looks like we've got an auditor on board, which must be a sign that we're good to go. Just give us a couple of minutes, folks. We'll just see Derek on board and just check that we are good to go, if that's okay. Yeah, no, appreciate it. Yeah. Welcome, Derek. How are you?
Hi, Bruce. Good yourself.
Good. We're grateful to see you. It's been a long day, but it's probably been even longer for you, I suspect. So that's great, and it's good to have you here. Derek, I was just talking about process as we move into reconvening our meeting. For what it's worth, we are in public. It will be in public for the course of the consideration, although towards the end I will ask that the committee moves into public excluded so we can talk with you directly without management being present. So look, welcome back, committee. Appreciate the day. I'd like to reconvene our meeting and start by returning to receipt of a major late item. We have 3 items that we have received late, and I seek your indulgence to accept. They are the annual report, the letter of representation, which we sign and provide to the auditor, and also the proposed audit opinion, which would be signed by Derek. they're necessary for us to proceed. So I'd like to move from the chair that we receive these. Oh, hello, got a hand up here. Sorry, am I a bit quick off the mark?
Yes. Through yourself, the Chair, I'd just like to advise Council that the annual report that is attached in board books is the draft annual report. Subject to today's events, there are some minor amendments that will need to be made and updated. They will be made available tomorrow for councillors, and Patricia will give an update of those changes when we go through the report.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to move that we receive these three major late items. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Right. We have. Hello.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you, Derek.
Yeah, maybe just a comment from our side as well. With those late adjustments and that came through, we have identified an error in that. So we would need to agree that that be corrected as part of this process for that adoption to take place.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you say there was another item.
No, so because of the late adjustment, we went through those adjustments prior to the meeting, and we have identified an error with the figures that's being proposed.
So we can adjust it tomorrow.
Right, okay, but it's not going to hold us up. It's not going to hold us up today, Derek. We just need to recognise in our resolutions that we have an item to change. Okay, that's cool. Thank you. So we have a paper, actually did come with the agenda. Thank you, Patricia. Well done for the hard yards. I wonder whether you'd like to share the key points with us, or you or Michael, please.
Thank you. Thanks. Now, I'll pretty much take the paper as read, but I want to make some particular points in relation to the annual report. So, as we've said, there are some late adjustments, and I'll go through those shortly. The annual report is different this year than in prior years because we do have a difference in opinion between ourselves and Audit New Zealand on the valuation, or whether we should have revaluated our infrastructure assets this year. That is the major item within the annual report. Officers' opinion was that while there were some indicators in the last two quarters, so the March and June quarters of 21, that prices had increased significantly, we don't consider this was significant enough. There was enough evidence that we would need to revalue. Audit New Zealand have taken they have come to a different conclusion to that, and that is the basis for the qualification of our infrastructure assets and our operational land and building assets. These are all due for a revaluation at 30 June 2022. So they were going to be revalued in the coming year anyway. So that's the main point on that one. There is, and we will go through, there's a lot more detail behind that, but I know that Risk and Assurance have had that full discussion already, and it's repeated in the paper. Now, in relation to the late changes from the version that you've got in board books, these are in relation to the consolidation entries, so the council group numbers, and how we consolidate our interests in associates and joint ventures. A very technical set of accounting rules, and we needed to correct that error. It was material, so we had to bring it through. So that has changed the total assets figure now to $1.3 billion. Actually hasn't changed it very much. We're talking, this was a change of $1.5 million that we've made through it. But on our income statement, or a statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses, which is page 105 of the annual report, that has changed the bottom line. The total comprehensive revenue and expense has changed from $12.5 million to $14 million as we've flowed that through. It has consequences to a number of other notes as we're changing both assets and income, and those have been done this afternoon and passed through audit, and together with the error in these numbers that I've got in front of me here will be corrected and made available when we publish the annual report.
For my benefit, can you just tell me what is this late error?
Well, I would have to actually ask Derek what this late error is, because I haven't been advised of it either.
Oh, right.
Hearing it from Derek now is the first time that I've become aware that there's another change to these numbers.
What is the late error, please, Derek?
Yes, so with the flow through of reducing your expenditure, what we've also noticed is that consequently the profit in your associates have reduced, but your investment in your associates have increased. We would have expected with a reduction in the profit to associates that the investment in associates will also decrease with the same amount. So we need to work through that with Patricia subsequent to the meeting to determine what the correcting entry should be.
Right, and so that's going to affect the balance sheet.
Yes, because our understanding is that if your profit in your associates reduce, your investment in your associates will subsequently also reduce.
Okay, thank you. So it's a continuation of the same error that you've been chasing. I mean, I don't mean that clinically, but you've been having to chase around today in terms of the impact of the $1.5 million change. Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to raise for us, Patricia?
Not at this point, unless, Michael, you've got something that you would like to add.
Yes, through yourself, Chair, just at this time I'd like to remind Risk and Assurance was in connection with the difference we had in relation to the standards. We also discussed what the impact of that was, and just for noting for record in the public forum, we did have confirmation in relation to the impact from Fitch that this would not have an impact in relation to our credit rating. And the other side is that this is the issue is an increase in our asset valuation, and from perspective of impact on our bottom line, that would improve our bottom line. So from what that means financially, it means we're being very cautious and prudent in our approach, basically taking a low risk in relation to the market shifts and what impacts that has on our accounts. The only thing that we will need to do is reflect that in the new year in relation to any changes that may have on depreciation and future expenses, and reflecting that in increased costs in our annual plan, which we are doing as well, based on the advice that we have received.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Michael, for that. Derek, before I open up to councillors for questions, is there anything that you would like to say at this stage about either your opinion, letter of representation, or indeed the annual accounts?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, from our perspective, as Patricia already highlighted, the audit report is qualified this year due to that difference with council regarding the fair value compared to the carrying value. We believe there is a material difference between the possible fair value of your property, plant and equipment compared to the current carrying value. So that is the reason why the audit report is qualified for this year. Also, we did include an emphasis of matter paragraph relating to the Three Waters reform, where we are making reference to your own disclosures within your annual report regarding that. In terms of the letter of representation, that is a standard representation, and there are two uncorrected misstatements also included in the representation letter regarding and investment properties that has been identified at year end that has not yet been, or that has been sold but not yet been accounted for appropriately within the accounting records. It is below our materiality threshold, but it still warrants to be included in our representation letter to acknowledge those uncorrected misstatements. Also, maybe just from operationally, I think I want to thank management throughout the audit. It's been a tough year, a difficult year. We know with regard to the extensions to deadlines, and really want to thank management and council for their cooperation throughout the audit process. We really worked well with everyone on the team, although we did have our differences regarding the matters that we ended up qualifying on. I think we could still, we had robust discussions around that, but could in the end still agree to disagree, and I don't think our relationship is in any way affected as a result of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dirk. Appreciate that. Members, are there any questions you'd like to ask? Darren?
Thanks, Chair. Look, I think I signalled last week that I'm a little frustrated that the process has taken so long and ended up in a position where we get a qualified opinion. And it's over professional interpretation in this instance. I was on council when we last had a qualified opinion, and in that instance we utterly deserved it. Here you've got a professional difference of opinion over evaluation, and the timing of which changed through no fault of our own, really. And that is very frustrating, but I understand it. I guess I'd like to echo Derek's comments, and it's nice to hear them about the cooperation from our staff, and from a councillor perspective, want to acknowledge the work that Michael and Patricia have done along with the rest of the ELT in providing the information for the auditors when they've been on site, and Chair, also to yourself and Ross for the work that you've done with them over this past couple of weeks when we've had an indication of a potentially qualified opinion. My question for Derek is really, is there anything else that we could have done to expedite the process? Because we're a couple of days away from wanting to shut down from Christmas. This is not when we want to be dealing with this sort of thing.
Chair, I think through you, yes, I mean, I think this year has been extraordinary in the sense that from our perspective, there has been a huge auditor shortage. So the Office of the Auditor General approached Parliament to extend reporting deadlines. Due to our own stock shortages, we had to prioritise our work in such a way that we can ensure that all respective sectors meet their statutory deadlines. And unfortunately, council deadlines are at the end of that queue. And with the extension being up until the end of December, all our staff only were allocated to council audits late in the year. I think with regards to the issue that emanated into the qualification, I think from our perspective, we did pick up on that quite early and engage with management quite early on in the process. Although, again, granted, it was too late for management to do anything about that at that point in time, as it's quite an extensive exercise for management to go through a full evaluation exercise, needing to procure service providers that can do it, for them to go through all council's assets. And so that in itself is quite a lengthy and long exercise to do that. So other than that, we can only hope that come next year, we're in a better position from a staffing perspective to ensure that we can perform the audit sooner.
Can I just clarify, Chair, because neither of us want to go through this, and you'll be aware, Derek, that we've had more than our fair share of publicity with DIA, so getting a qualified opinion and your name read out in Parliament doesn't go down too well. Can can you just confirm for me that we're that far down the priority list that it pushed out the time frames that ends up punishing us? Have I got that wrong?
Yes. Again, it's council's responsibility to ensure that your carrying value does not differ materially from the fair value of assets. And in terms of the accounting standards, you need to determine that with sufficient regularity to ensure that there isn't a material mismatch between what you're carrying in your books compared to what a possible fair value might be. Now, again, through the discussions with management, they believe the information available at the point in time didn't indicate any material movements. But again, you would see from the audit opinion that there is evidence within the market that indicated that there are material movement, and some of those indicators around unit rates, contract prices, and other indices that valuers also use to determine what the fair value is. We believe that information is available as at the reporting date, which is the end of June each year.
So can you just confirm for me then, Derek, do we need to review the frequency with which we go through that revaluation process?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nobby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And for your benefit, Derek, I'm Nobby Clark, I'm Deputy Mayor, and I have to be gone in a few minutes' time because this has just dragged on way too long for me. So I've got some reflections on the process that's been used as more than the result itself. So I put aside the qualified or the tagged report because I think it's an inappropriate gesture, and I support what's the staff position we've got. And for us to get a qualified report about 6 months before we're actually going to do the revaluation, I think it's just an absolute waste of everybody's time. But it's more the process for me. We had this last minute exercise last year where we got reports given to us at the 11th hour and people really didn't get a chance to go through it. I mean, I've got 2 reports sitting here right now that I haven't had a chance to read, and I guess we'll accept those today. And it's not an appropriate way for us to do business. It's an important document that we sign, or that the Mayor signs on our behalf with the Chief Executive, and we just can't be doing this year on year on. And so I guess one of the things I want to signal for Audit New Zealand is that it seems to me that the 3 largest councils in the country seem to get done first, followed by some others that might be of concern, and then it goes north to south. And so it seems to me that Invercargill's always at the tail end of this process. And while that might be appropriate on some years, it's not fair to us to be always last in the queue and to always have our stress running around doing shitloads of bloody overtime and stretching to the max to get this done in time. And it's not good enough. We had an approach from Audit New Zealand earlier on in the year about increased costs, and they were quite significant to our bottom line. And I would have expected that we'd had some improvement in the performance that we had on the previous year, but that's not been the case. And so it leaves me wondering about, while we have a tagged report or a qualified report, whether our response back to the Office of the Auditor General should be that we're not satisfied with the auditing we're getting, and that whether we should consider whether we look for an alternative third-party auditor, which some other councils do have. And so that's an issue for me. And I guess the other issue is the issue that you say you thank us for the cooperation, but there's no recognition at what cost at our end. I mean, we've been sitting around here for hours waiting for these reports. Our schedule today has been an absolute mess if anybody's watching. Doesn't look well for the public when they focus in, as one of my colleagues has already said. So, I mean, we're a bit lost about where we go to with this. And I guess my one question I'd leave with you is, how will Audit New Zealand improve its performance going forward? And while staffing is one issue, being at the end of the queue every year, year on year, is not going to resolve our issues. We didn't have it last year, and we certainly haven't got it this year. So I know it sounds a bit negative, but I think it just needs to be said. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nobby. You got any response you'd like to make, Derek?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think from our perspective, it must be recognised as well that Invercargill City Council does have a lot of subsidiaries and associates, and all of them feed into the council's group accounts. All of them have their own reporting deadlines there, and they need to be concluded before we can start and finalize the council's annual report and audit. So there is quite a few audits that lead up into the consolidation of the council's accounts, and I think that also adds to the timing of the council's own audit.
Rangi.
Thank you, Chair. My question, Derek, is regarding the valuation differences. Now, I'm Ian Pottinger, Chair of Infrastructure, and looking at that difference, our staff, we've got expert staff using expert advice to gain these valuations. Obviously, Audit New Zealand does use expert staff as well, though they can't do the valuations themselves. Now, if you use some matrix developed for New Zealand, how does that apply to Invercargill when the cost of doing business in Invercargill is a lot cheaper than doing business throughout the rest of New Zealand? That is a fact. Different costs involving certain infrastructure is cheaper to do in Southland. Now, hopefully the matrix that Audit New Zealand used is not a broad one that just takes a swiping medium at New Zealand's costs and is more detailed like the one we would use.
Yes, through your chair, yes. We do look at contracts across the board, and even your own contracts of other service providers within the region, within your own area, within your own town. So it's not only holistic view across New Zealand. We do make it specific for each respective council and the area in which they operate.
Ross, I think, by the way, I'm concerned about a quorum. So, yes, I'd like to make certain that we do proceed reasonably at speed. So, if we just have questions, it would be great. Ross, your turn, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ross Jackson, independent member of Risk and Assurance and Chartered Accountant. First comment I just note is that Parliament did pass urgent legislation earlier this year to extend the reporting deadlines. In hindsight, it would have been a bit longer.
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear. If it's directed at me.
Sorry, Derek. I'll start again. Ross Jackson, independent member of Risk and Assurance and Chartered Accountant. The first comment I just make is that earlier in the year, Parliament passed legislation to extend the reporting deadline. In hindsight, it would have been better if it was even longer than this, and we acknowledge the shortage of audit staff in particular, and note the work that's trying to be done to bring them in across the border, but that is going to be ongoing for some time, and we need to plan better for this coming year on Audit New Zealand's timeliness and resource and action there. Now, the other point, just going back to the consistency with other councils that had their audit completed earlier in the year, did not have this issue. It's only because we have sign off later in the year, and therefore the looking at the indices has reflected on the position that we have had that you have taken. As a professional, I know we have debated this and have different professional opinions, but it is difficult to understand why it's appropriate to look at a 30th of September index rather than 30th of June, because it wasn't known at 30th of June. And was there an adjusting or underlying event where those circumstances were in play? We're actually in lockdown over that time, so it's pretty hard to look in hindsight. We've got a history of using the BERL and applying it, and it's been accepted previously. So I also question why indices are a fair reflection then should be adopted in this case. Again, the public sector accounting standards we do have a difference of opinion on, and I guess that's the position that's been adopted and we're having to reluctantly accept now. Again, I'd follow on later and look at discuss how we can do better next year.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. Look, I would just like to reflect that I do think it's important, particularly given the situation we're faced with, which is needing to adopt a qualified or a modified audit report. I think I'd like to make it clear to the committee that informally, at the very least, we will sit down with Derek and Chris and debrief the audit to understand the situation. That's absolutely important in this situation, so that we can grab the learnings out of it. Do you have any more questions about the opinion or the letter of representation or the accounts? Can I just draw your attention to a couple of things? We're well aware, obviously, of why we're being qualified. I would just like to draw your attention, if you could take the draft opinion, please. I just want to reflect on what Derek is actually saying here, and it's on page 3 of the draft opinion, which is that he's saying his work is limited. In other words, he can't form an opinion on the value of our assets. That's the first thing that we should note, is what's being said here. The argument we have, and Ross, thank you, you've articulated the reasons why we don't believe this should have affected the valuation at 30 June, but rather would have been disclosed by way of note, recognising that we would, in all cases, have to revalue in the current financial year. Michael, in his paper, has also indicated that the economic impact of this, in other words, are we worse off? Are we less prudent? Are we less prudent? Is not the case. Essentially, the numbers that we have reported here, other than an impact on depreciation, is actually reasonable. The challenge for us will be, and this is where we have agreed, particularly with Derek, is that actually values are increasing. So when the revaluation does occur, it will have an impact on rates. We will be faced with increased costs for renewal of assets. So the critical question around here is the timing of that recognition. Derek's asked us to recognise it in our 2021 financial statements. We don't believe we needed to. We do recognise that the 21-22 will be affected, even if it was only for the fact we've got to do a revaluation. But we should expect a significant adjustment in the nature of our assets. So that's the first thing I'd just like to draw attention to here, is that actually Derek is not forming an opinion on those assets because he is saying that his ability to form a view is limited. Okay. I think that's the critical thing in terms of the letter of representation, which while actually it's being provided to us by Derek, thank you, it's actually us writing back to Derek, and it's reasonable for any auditor to expect us to represent certain things. I would just like to draw your attention that while I think in the preamble before we met, Patricia quite rightly said we're representing quite a number of things, that our systems have operated effectively through the course of the year, other than what we might have acknowledged as being no instances of fraud or corruption. We are attesting those to him, and again, as a committee, Council should be looking to us for a positive recommendation that the letter of representation can be signed. So we need to think of those things in the next few moments as we actually do it. The other thing that I just want to draw your attention to, given we have a modified opinion, is actually we're also attesting, and it's the bottom of page 5 of the proposed letter, as to the going concern of Invercargill City Council. Our obligations are that we are comfortable that we can meet our bills as they fall due over the next 12 months. And Patricia, thank you for your paper that anticipated the question, and actually there is good advice there why we can assert that. Okay, so that is the nature of the work that is, the nature of what's been asked of us. I would like, sorry, Rangi, did you have a question at this stage you want to ask?
No, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So at this stage, what I'd like to do mainly because I do want to have time with Derek before we pass the resolutions. I would like to go to the resolutions because they were written at a time prior to today, and I need to make certain that they are fully relevant, please. Okay, so if we go to our agendas, on page 4 of our agenda, we have quite a substantial suite of recommendations that need to be made. Firstly, we note the Risk and Assurance Committee have reviewed the draft annual report. I think it's relevant to eliminate from this resolution the PPP. Darren, are you comfortable with that? Sweet. Notes: at the time of the report was prepared, the audit field work was incomplete and sign-off was still to be received. Well, we can eliminate that now because we have in effect got sign-off from Derek. And I think if I read this correctly, we can eliminate this second resolution. Correct? Rightio. We note that the opinion will have or does have a limited scope and will not cover the valuation of the council's infrastructure and operational assets. The limitation of scope is based on the conclusion that based on, I've got a few bases here, haven't we? Based on the increases in economic indicators available to council from March to June this year, council should have revalued these assets. That's Derek's view. I think we can get rid of the subject to that occurs there because we've got rid of 2 and 3. I don't know what would be subject to that one. We would state the committee recommends that council adopts the 2021 annual report for Invercargill City Council Group. So it's the group council that we're doing here. And I think we can say full stop because we have the independent auditor's report now. We authorise the general manager, it's Michael, take it, to make minor changes to the 2021 annual report prior to its publication, and we need to get rid of if necessary because it is necessary. Okay, and I think we've had that discussion at the start. Today, staff and the auditors have been working hard to chase around a error in the consolidation, which essentially is what this needs to be in here for, to permit that to be finalised. We authorise the Mayor and the Chief Executive to sign the letter of representation, and I think again we can say full stop because it has been circulated. We authorise the General Manager to make changes necessary to the summary annual report. We have actually also got the summary annual report as well, that there will be some consequential changes to make to the summary annual report document and release it for publication within 20 working days of signing, which is a statutory requirement. And the committee recommends that we exempt the Invercargill Community Recreation and Sports Trust from being a council-controlled organisation for 1 July 2021 for a further 3 years, noting the decision of council earlier in 2021 has indicated that this entity will be wound up by 30 June 2022. It's a tidying up task.
Chair, can we just go back to 7 because I think we jumped over it.
Did I? Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, my mistakes, Darren. So we authorise the Mayor and the Chief, we recommend to Council, obviously, that the Mayor and Chief Executive sign the Statement of Compliance within the annual report. Full stop. I don't think we need the subject to. Thank you for that. So it's a letter of representation they need to sign and the Statement of Compliance. Thank you. Appreciate the detail. 9, as I've said about the trust, is just tidying up a piece of work there that is be good to have cleared. I think those are the relevant information, the relevant resolutions. Does anybody else have any thoughts on those resolutions? I think they're reasonably straight. Are you happy with those then, Michael? Clear? You're comfortable we can work on those? Right. I know I've got to catch up with Eric, so we will look to move these once we've had a chance to talk with Derek alone without management. So to do that, I need to move into private, or into public excluded, sorry. So from the chair, I'd like to move that we go into public excluded for the purposes of a free and frank discussion with the auditor. Thank you, Ross. I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. We'll try and be as quick as we can, Claire. And